What if I told you that every life-changing decision you'll ever make doesn't come from advice, books, or even logic? No. The real answer is something we've been taught to ignore, something we've labeled as unreliable. I'm talking about intuition. Now, before you roll your eyes or think, "Oh, great, another fluffy, follow-your-heart video," stick around. Because in the next few minutes, I'll show you how intuition took me from second-guessing everything to living a life of clarity, purpose, and trust. Spoiler alert. It wasn't easy, and there were a few moments where I thought, this can't possibly work. But here's the twist. It did, and it completely transformed my life. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's dive in. But don't get too comfortable, because I'm about to challenge everything you think you know about decision-making. Step 1. The beginning. A search for clarity. Have you ever felt like you're standing in the middle of a crossroads, unsure which path to take? That's exactly where I found myself when my journey began. I had ambitions, goals, and dreams, but I felt like I was walking in circles, constantly second-guessing every decision I made. It was frustrating and exhausting. Let me take you back to one particular day. I was sitting at my desk, staring at my endless to-do list, overwhelmed and stuck. I kept thinking, what am I even doing? Why can't I figure this out? I turned to everything I thought could help. Self-help books, motivational podcasts, even asking friends for advice. And while all of those things gave me temporary relief, the deeper clarity I craved was nowhere to be found. Then, one afternoon, I came across a quote that would change everything. The answers you seek are already within you. At first, I laughed. It sounded like one of those cliches you'd find on a motivational poster. But for some reason, those words stayed with me. They felt different, like they were speaking directly to the part of me that had been searching for something deeper. Here's where things got interesting. That quote started planting seeds of curiosity. I began wondering, what does it mean to have the answers within me? Is it some kind of mystical power I don't know about? I didn't have a clue, but I couldn't let it go. It was like my brain was stuck on replay, circling back to the idea that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as lost as I thought I was. But let's be honest, I didn't trust myself back then. I'd spent so long looking outside for answers that the idea of turning inward felt foreign. I thought, how can I possibly trust myself when I don't even know where to start? That doubt kept me stuck for a while, but it also pushed me to dig deeper. One day, in a moment of desperation, I decided to test this whole inner knowing theory. I sat quietly and asked myself a simple question. What feels right in this moment? Not what I thought I should do, not what others expected of me, just what felt right. To my surprise, I didn't get a clear answer, but I felt a tiny shift, almost like a whisper saying, "Keep going." Here's a surprising twist. That small whisper was enough to keep me curious. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I started to realize that clarity wasn't something I could force. It wasn't about finding the perfect book, the perfect plan, or the perfect advice. It was about creating space for something deeper to emerge. Let me share a quick story. Around this time, a friend invited me on a spontaneous road trip. I was hesitant because I had so much on my plate, but something in me said, "Go." Against all logic, I listened. During that trip, we had a conversation about intuition that opened my eyes to a new way of thinking. My friend said something I'll never forget. The problem isn't that you don't have answers, it's that you're too busy to hear them. That conversation was a game changer. It made me realize how noisy my life had become and how disconnected I was from my own inner voice. From that moment on, I knew I had to make a change. But how? That's where silence and the next steps come into play. Fast forward a few days, and I found myself sitting alone, trying something new. No phone, no music, no distractions, just me and my thoughts. And let me tell you, it was awful at first. My brain went into overdrive. Did I pay that bill? What's for dinner? Why did I say that embarrassing thing in 8th grade? But then, buried beneath all the noise, there it was, a tiny, almost imperceptible whisper. Here's where it gets interesting. That whisper wasn't a voice telling me exactly what to do. It was more like a feeling, a nudge that said, "You already know." And the craziest part? When I started listening to it, things began to fall into place. But let's hold that thought, because how I got to this point is a story in itself. Step 2. Getting still. The practice of silence. Imagine walking through a crowded street, cars honking, people shouting, and music blaring from every corner. Now try having a deep conversation with someone in that chaos. Impossible, right? That's exactly how my mind felt when I first started exploring intuition. It was noisy, cluttered, and constantly distracted. Here's the funny part. When someone suggested I spend time in silence, I actually laughed out loud. Silence? Who has time for that, I thought. My days were packed with work, social media, and a never-ending list of responsibilities. But deep down, I knew the constant busyness wasn't helping me. So, one evening, I decided to give it a shot. I set a timer for 5 minutes, sat down, and closed my eyes. What happened next? Total chaos. My thoughts raced like a roller coaster. Did I send that email? What should I eat for dinner? Am I doing this silence thing right? It felt like my mind was throwing a tantrum, desperate for attention. I wanted to give up, but then I remembered something I'd read. The noise gets louder before it gets quiet. So, I stayed. After a few days of this awkward silence practice, something unexpected happened. Amidst the chaos, I began noticing small gaps, moments of stillness between my thoughts. It was like finding a hidden pause button in my mind, and in those pauses, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. Let me tell you a quick story. One afternoon, while sitting in silence, I remembered a childhood memory of playing in my backyard. Back then, I wasn't worried about deadlines or decisions. I just trusted life to unfold naturally. That memory reminded me that I'd been connected to my intuition all along. I'd just forgotten how to listen. Here's where it gets interesting. As I continued practicing silence, I began noticing subtle feelings, almost like whispers guiding me. For example, one day, I felt an urge to take a walk in a nearby park. It didn't make sense, but I followed it anyway. During that walk, I bumped into an old friend who ended up sharing advice that solved a problem I'd been stuck on for weeks. Coincidence? Maybe. But it felt like more than that. It felt like intuition at work. But let me be real with you. Staying still wasn't easy. There were days when I'd sit in silence and feel absolutely nothing. My mind would tell me, "This is pointless, go back to your to-do list." It took discipline to resist that urge and trust the process. Over time, I realized that silence isn't about forcing answers to appear. It's about creating space for them to arrive naturally. Think of it like tuning into a radio station. At first, all you hear is static. But as you adjust the dial and find the right frequency, the signal becomes clear. That's what silence did for me. It helped me tune into my inner frequency, the one where intuition speaks. One day, I decided to take it a step further. Instead of just sitting quietly, I started asking myself open-ended questions like, what do I need right now? Or what feels true to me? At first, the answers were vague, but over time, they became clearer. I began to notice subtle shifts in how I felt, like an inner nudge pointing me in a certain direction. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was unmistakable. It was as if my intuition had been waiting for me to ask the right questions. Let me share another moment that truly surprised me. One morning during my silence practice, I got a sudden sense that I needed to reconnect with an old colleague. I hadn't spoken to them in years, and logically, there was no reason to reach out. But I decided to follow that feeling. When I called, I discovered that they were looking for someone to collaborate on a project, an opportunity that ended up shaping my career in ways I couldn't have imagined. Here's the thing about silence. It's not about achieving something. It's about creating a space where intuition can emerge. Sometimes the insights come immediately. Other times they show up days or even weeks later, but they always come when the time is right. And let's not forget the humor in it all. There were days when I'd sit in silence, only to be interrupted by my dog barking or my phone buzzing. It taught me to embrace imperfection. Silence doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be consistent. Even 5 minutes of stillness can make a difference. So, if you're thinking, I'm too busy for this, I get it. But here's the truth. Silence isn't about taking time out of your life. It's about reconnecting with the life you're living. Think of it as a reset button, a chance to pause, breathe, and hear the wisdom that's already within you. When I first started practicing silence, it felt like stepping into a noisy party hosted by my own mind. Every insecurity, unfinished task, and random thought seemed to scream for attention. I remember sitting there, thinking, this is ridiculous. How is this supposed to help me find clarity? But then I remembered something from childhood. Have you ever tried to catch a butterfly? The harder you chase it, the more it flutters away. But when you sit still, it lands gently on your hand. That's what silence felt like. The more I resisted the noise in my head, the louder it got. But when I allowed myself to sit with it, something shifted. Beneath the chaos, I found stillness. And that stillness? That's where my intuition began to surface. It was like discovering a hidden spring under layers of rock, subtle, refreshing, and completely natural. But don't think this was a one-time breakthrough. Silence was just the starting point. Now you might be wondering, okay, but what if I sit in silence and hear nothing? That's completely normal. Intuition doesn't always speak on command. Sometimes the act of sitting quietly is the message itself. It's your mind saying, hey, slow down. You don't have to figure it all out right now. What if the most profound answers in your life aren't something you need to search for, but something you need to uncover within? Stick around, because in the next step, I'm going to share how meditation took this practice of silence to an entirely new level. It's where things started to get even more transformative. Ready to explore the next layer of connecting with intuition? Let's dive into it. Step 3, the practice of meditation. Okay, confession time. When I first heard people rave about meditation, I thought it was overrated. You mean to tell me that sitting still and doing nothing is supposed to solve my problems? Hard pass. If silence is the doorway to intuition, meditation is the path that leads you through it. When I first heard about meditation, I'll be honest, I was skeptical. I pictured monks sitting on mountaintops in impossible stillness. I thought, that's great for them, but how could someone like me, with a racing mind and a never-ending to-do list, ever sit still like that? But life has a funny way of nudging you toward what you need. During a particularly stressful time, when I was overwhelmed with decisions and feeling disconnected from myself, I decided to give meditation a try. I didn't have grand expectations. In fact, I thought I'd fail miserably. But something inside me whispered, just start. Let me tell you a secret. Meditation isn't about clearing your mind completely. When I sat down for my first session, I thought I was doing it all wrong because my mind wouldn't stop buzzing. But then I realized meditation isn't about stopping your thoughts. It's about observing them without judgment. Imagine your thoughts as clouds drifting across the sky. You don't have to chase them or push them away. You just watch them come and go. On my third day of meditating, something remarkable happened. I wasn't doing anything extraordinary, just sitting quietly, breathing deeply. But I suddenly felt this wave of calm wash over me. It wasn't like my problems disappeared, but for the first time, they didn't feel so heavy. It was as if my intuition whispered, you're exactly where you need to be. Now I know what you're thinking. I don't have hours to meditate every day. Neither did I. That's why I started with just 10 minutes a day. I'd sit in my favorite corner, light a candle, and close my eyes. Those 10 minutes became my sanctuary, a time to pause, breathe, and reconnect with myself. Let me share a funny moment with you. One day, I set up my meditation space. Perfectly. Dim lighting, soft music, the works. But just as I closed my eyes, my neighbors started mowing the lawn. At first, I was annoyed, but then I decided to embrace the noise as part of the experience. And you know what? It became a lesson in accepting things as they are, not as I wish them to be, a lesson my intuition often reminds me of. The beauty of meditation is that it trains you to listen, not just to the external world, but to your inner one. Over time, I started noticing patterns in my thoughts and feelings. I became more aware of those gut instincts that used to be drowned out by overthinking. For instance, during one meditation session, a random idea popped into my mind. Call your friend Emma. It seemed completely out of the blue, but I decided to follow through. When I called, Emma told me she was going through a tough time and needed someone to talk to. That experience made me realize that intuition doesn't always speak in grand revelations. Sometimes it's as simple as a gentle nudge in the right direction. One of the most powerful tools I discovered in meditation was breath work. Whenever I felt anxious or disconnected, I focused on my breathing, slow, deep inhales, and even slower exhales. It's amazing how something so simple can be so transformative. Your breath is like a bridge connecting your body, mind, and intuition. I once had to make a major decision about a career opportunity. On paper, it seemed perfect, but something didn't feel right. Instead of rushing into a decision, I sat down to meditate. As I focused on my breath, I felt this overwhelming sense of clarity, like my intuition was gently guiding me to trust that gut feeling. I declined the offer, and a few weeks later, a better opportunity came along that aligned perfectly with my goals. Meditation isn't about achieving some mystical state of enlightenment. It's about being present with yourself. Some days my mind would wander endlessly, and that was okay. Other days I'd feel deeply connected, as if my intuition was speaking directly to me. The key was showing up consistently, without judgment or expectation. During one meditation session, I had a vivid image of a river. The water was murky, filled with debris. But as I sat there, the debris started sinking, and the water became crystal clear. That's what meditation did for my mind. It cleared the murkiness, allowing my intuition to shine through. Have you ever tried meditating with a pet around? My dog would often join me, only to paw at my face or curl up in my lap. At first, it felt like a distraction, but over time, it became part of the experience. It reminded me that life is messy and imperfect, and that's exactly where intuition thrives, in the midst of our beautifully imperfect lives. Meditation taught me that intuition isn't something you find, it's something you uncover. It's always been there, patiently waiting for you to quiet the noise and listen. But this is just the beginning. In the next step, I'll share how I took this practice even further, how I learned to not just hear my intuition, but to trust it completely, even when it didn't make logical sense. Stay with me, because what comes next is where things really start to transform. Ready to take the leap? Let's dive into the next chapter of this journey. Step 4. Listening and trusting the inner voice. Okay, now that we've silenced the noise, quieted our minds, and even spent time meditating, there's still one crucial piece to this puzzle: trusting what comes up. This is where the real magic happens. Because here's the thing. Your intuition can be whispering all at once, but if you're not ready to trust it, nothing is going to change. Let me ask you something. How often do you get a gut feeling and immediately brush it off? Maybe you think, I'm just overthinking, or that's probably just paranoia. Same here, until I decided to stop ignoring that voice. At first, trusting my intuition felt like jumping into the unknown. It was like trying to take a step into the dark, not knowing if there was solid ground beneath my feet. But I'm telling you, as scary as it felt, this was the turning point in my journey. The more I trusted, the clearer and stronger my intuition became. I'll be honest, this was not an easy step. In the beginning, I doubted myself constantly. I'd get these gut feelings, but the logical part of my brain would always question them. Is this really my intuition, or am I just overthinking things? Or worse, what if I make the wrong decision? Let me share a personal story that perfectly illustrates this. A few months ago, I had an opportunity to collaborate with a company. Everything about it seemed perfect. The timing, the project, the people involved. But the moment I heard about it, something inside me said, "This doesn't feel right." It wasn't a big, dramatic feeling. It was more like a subtle nudge, almost as if my intuition was saying, "Wait, hold on a second." Of course, the logical part of my mind told me, "Don't be ridiculous, this is a great opportunity. It looks amazing on paper." But I decided to listen to that small voice. I stepped back, thought about it more, and ultimately declined the offer. A few weeks later, I found out that the company had been facing some major internal struggles, and my intuition had spared me from a potentially disastrous situation. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. Intuition doesn't always come with a big neon sign. It's subtle, it's quiet, but it's there. And the more you listen to it, the clearer it becomes. Have you ever had a feeling about someone before you even got to know them? Maybe you felt like you could trust them, or maybe something about them just didn't sit right with you. That's intuition. I've had a number of these experiences in my personal life. I've met people who, within minutes of talking to them, I just knew that they were someone I could trust. It wasn't anything they said, but it was a deep internal knowing. It's almost like you can sense their energy. I know it might sound a little woo-woo, but trust me, it's real. And what I've learned over time is that my intuition has been right every single time. Sure, there have been moments of doubt, moments where I questioned if I was making the right call, but when I followed that gut feeling, I always ended up in the right place. So, what happens when you don't listen to your intuition? Well, for me, it often meant taking the harder path. I once ignored a small voice telling me to back out of a business deal that didn't feel aligned with my values. I thought I knew better. After all, the numbers looked great. But in the end, the deal fell apart, causing more stress and frustration than if I had just listened to my intuition in the first place. And that's the kicker. When you ignore your intuition, you might not see the consequences right away. But eventually, things fall out of alignment. Life becomes harder. The stress starts to pile up. You feel disconnected from yourself. Your inner voice knows what's best for you, even when your mind wants to push against it. The key to truly trusting your intuition is to stop second-guessing it. When I started listening to that gut feeling without overanalyzing it, everything changed. I realized that intuition doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. It doesn't even need to make sense to me sometimes. It's a deep internal compass that guides you, regardless of external opinions or logic. I remember a moment where I had to make a decision about whether to move forward with a project that was close to my heart, but a little out of my comfort zone. My intuition told me this is the right time. But the fear of failure was overwhelming. I wanted to say no, play it safe, but something inside of me just wouldn't let me back down. I listened, and I'm so glad I did. Not only did the project turn out to be one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, but it also led to other unexpected opportunities. One of the most profound lessons I've learned on this journey is that intuition requires an element of surrender. It's not about forcing things to happen or controlling every outcome. It's about surrendering to the process and trusting that things will unfold as they should. Here's a story to illustrate this. A while back, I was in a situation where I couldn't decide which direction to take in my career. I had two opportunities on the table, and neither felt completely right. It was a difficult choice, but I decided to stop trying to control the situation. Instead, I surrendered. I followed my intuition, and ultimately, things fell into place. I got a call about a completely unexpected opportunity that combined elements of both career paths, something I never would have imagined. The lesson here: Surrender isn't giving up. It's trusting the journey and allowing life to unfold. And here's the kicker. The more I trusted my intuition, the stronger it became. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more powerful it gets. But trust doesn't come easy. Sometimes it feels like walking in the dark, hoping there's a floor beneath your feet. And yet, every step I took built my confidence. Now here's the thing. If you've ever followed your intuition and it led to amazing results, you know what I'm talking about. But what happens when your intuition leads you somewhere that feels uncertain? That's the next part of the journey. Learning to trust even when things don't look perfect. In the next step, I'll dive into how to not just follow your intuition, but how to embrace the unknown and take risks that feel right. And let me tell you, this is where the real transformation begins. Stay with me. We're just getting started. Step 5, the transformation living in alignment with your intuition. All right, let's dive into the most exciting part of the journey, the transformation. This is where things really started to change for me. Trusting and listening to my intuition didn't just help me make better decisions. It completely shifted how I saw the world and how I approached life. It was like waking up from a long, deep sleep. And as I started embracing my intuition, I noticed something incredible happening. Everything started to fall into alignment. The universe, it seemed, was on my side. Before this journey, I lived in a constant state of uncertainty. I was always second-guessing myself, constantly looking for external validation and wondering if I was making the right decisions. But as I began to follow my intuition, it was like a fog lifted. I started to feel more grounded and confident in every choice I made. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving day to day, I was thriving, living from a place of clarity, purpose, and inner strength. I remember one key moment when this transformation hit me hard. I was at a crossroads, deciding whether to take on a big project that felt exciting, but also a little risky. In the past, I would have hesitated, overanalyzed, and questioned whether I was capable. But this time, I had the confidence to follow my gut. I took the leap without hesitation, and the outcome was beyond what I had imagined. The project was a huge success, and it created even more opportunities. It wasn't just about the success. It was about realizing that trusting myself could lead to a ripple effect of positive change. When you start listening to your intuition, one of the first things you'll notice is how much easier it becomes to make decisions. No more endless back and forths in your head. No more doubts. You begin to make choices from a place of clarity, and your confidence grows with every decision you make. Take this story, for example. I used to feel paralyzed when it came to making big life decisions, especially ones involving relationships or business. I would go back and forth for days, if not weeks, over what I should do. But when I began to tap into my intuition, I started to trust that first instinct. I remember when I had to decide whether or not to continue working with a client who didn't quite align with my values. In the past, I would have second-guessed myself, but I listened to my gut. It told me to step away, and though it felt uncomfortable at the time, it was the right decision. That one choice opened up space for more aligned opportunities that I never could have imagined before. One of the biggest shifts for me was realizing that intuition doesn't just guide you on decisions, it guides you on your life's purpose. Before this journey, I was constantly asking myself, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? I felt like I had no clear direction. But the more I tuned into my intuition, the more I began to see the bigger picture. Suddenly, things weren't just about accomplishing goals. They were about aligning with what felt right for me on a deeper level. This realization became clearer when I was offered an opportunity to switch careers, one that many people around me thought was risky and unconventional. But I knew deep down that it was the right move for me. I could feel it in my bones. And once I made that leap, everything seemed to fall into place. The people I needed to meet, the resources I needed, and the right opportunities all appeared at the perfect time. I knew that I was finally living in alignment with my true purpose, and that was a life-changing moment. One of the most beautiful aspects of connecting with your intuition is what I like to call the flow state. It's when life starts to feel effortless. Things fall into place almost effortlessly. You're not forcing anything, and yet everything seems to work out in your favor. I first experienced this flow when I started saying yes to opportunities that felt aligned with my intuition, even if they didn't seem logical at the time. For example, when I decided to travel and meet people in different industries, even though I didn't have a concrete plan, everything I needed just appeared. It felt like the universe was supporting me every step of the way. People reached out to me for collaborations. Unexpected financial opportunities came. It was almost as though once I trusted myself and let go of the need for control, the universe began to open doors for me. Living in alignment with your intuition doesn't mean that life becomes 100% predictable or free of obstacles. But it does mean that you develop an unwavering confidence in yourself and your decisions, even when things seem uncertain. I've come to realize that intuition doesn't always provide clear answers. It doesn't come with a roadmap. But it does offer a deep sense of trust that the next step will unfold as it should. And that's incredibly liberating. I remember feeling nervous about a major decision that could affect the course of my life. It didn't make sense to move forward, at least on paper, but my intuition was guiding me. I trusted it. And in the end, that decision led to personal growth I never anticipated. It's in these moments of uncertainty that you begin to realize just how powerful intuition is. It's like having a compass that doesn't give you exact directions but points you in the right direction nonetheless. Even when you're lost or unsure, your intuition will guide you home. The beautiful thing about intuition is that it doesn't just impact one part of your life, it ripples out into every area. I've seen this firsthand. When I started trusting myself and following my intuition, my relationships improved, my health improved, and my work life flourished. I used to feel disconnected from the people around me, whether friends, family, or coworkers. But as I aligned with my inner voice, I noticed that I became more present and connected with those I loved. I felt less anxious, more grounded. The same principle applied to my career. When I aligned my work with my inner knowing, things began to feel fulfilling, not just successful. But here's my favorite part. Intuition doesn't just help you make better decisions. It connects you to something bigger. Call it your higher self, the universe, or simply your inner wisdom. It's a reminder that you're never truly alone. Now, I won't pretend this journey is all sunshine and rainbows. There were times I doubted myself, moments when I wanted to give up. But every step brought me closer to the kind of clarity and confidence I never thought possible. Step 6. Trusting the process. Surrendering to the flow of life. Now that we've covered the transformation that comes with connecting with your intuition, let's talk about one of the most important, yet often overlooked parts of the journey. Trusting the process. This is where things get a little tricky. Once you start tuning into your intuition and seeing results, it's easy to get caught up in trying to control the outcome. Trusting the process means surrendering your need for constant control and allowing life to unfold as it should. But here's the thing. Surrendering doesn't mean giving up or being passive. It's not about sitting back and waiting for things to happen to you. Instead, it's about flowing with life and being open to whatever comes your way without resistance. And let me tell you, this was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn. I'm someone who likes to plan, strategize, and know what's going to happen next. So, letting go of that control, that was a big deal. But I soon realized that by not trusting the process, I was blocking the flow of intuition. The more I tried to force things to happen my way, the more out of sync I became with my true self. I'll never forget the first time I consciously tried to let go of control. I was working on a project that was really important to me. I had a vision of how it would unfold, and I kept trying to micromanage every step. But no matter how hard I tried, things weren't moving forward the way I expected. I was getting frustrated, feeling stuck, and doubting my intuition. Then, during a quiet moment, I remembered something I had learned earlier in my journey. Surrendering isn't about doing nothing. It's about listening to your intuition and trusting that the right opportunities will show up at the right time. I took a step back, paused, and decided to stop overthinking everything. The results? Well, within a few days, everything started clicking into place. I received a call from a potential collaborator, and suddenly, the project I was stressing about was moving forward effortlessly. It was a pivotal moment. I realized that the more I resisted, the more I blocked the natural flow of things. By letting go, I allowed myself to receive what was meant for me. The universe wasn't working against me. It was waiting for me to trust the process. One of the biggest hurdles to trusting the process is the fear of the unknown. The idea of letting go of control can be terrifying. What if things go wrong? What if I make a mistake? What if I don't have all the answers? These are the questions that kept me stuck for a long time. But as I continued on my journey, I realized that embracing uncertainty is actually one of the most powerful things you can do. Intuition thrives in the unknown. It's like a dance. Sometimes you have to move without knowing the exact rhythm. There's beauty and growth in the mystery. I remember a time when I had no clear path forward, and every decision seemed risky. But instead of getting paralyzed by fear, I took a leap of faith. I trusted my intuition, even though I couldn't see the full picture. And you know what? That leap led to some of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The more I embraced the uncertainty, the more I realized that uncertainty isn't something to fear. It's a sign that you're on the verge of something new. One of the most frustrating aspects of trusting the process is the waiting. I'm sure you've experienced that feeling when you've done everything right, followed your intuition, and yet nothing seems to be happening. The temptation to rush the process is strong. I certainly struggled with impatience in the beginning, but the truth is, timing is everything. I remember waiting for months on an opportunity that seemed perfect for me, but nothing was coming through. I kept checking my email, wondering when the breakthrough would happen. But nothing came. I had to learn the hard way that just because things weren't happening on my timeline didn't mean I was doing something wrong. It meant I was learning to trust the rhythm of life. Eventually, that opportunity came through when I least expected it, and it was better than I could have imagined. It was a reminder that sometimes the universe is preparing things in the background, even when we can't see it. Patience is part of the process. When you trust that everything is unfolding exactly as it's meant to, you begin to cultivate a sense of peace and surrender. Now, I don't want to leave you with the impression that trusting the process means sitting around and waiting for life to happen to you. Trusting the process is about finding the balance between action and surrender. Yes, you still have to take inspired action when your intuition guides you, but you must also let go of the need to control the outcome. Take the example of an entrepreneur launching a new business. The business owner can plan and execute every part of the launch perfectly. But if they're constantly obsessed with making sure every detail goes according to plan, they'll block the flow of creativity and intuition. Instead, they need to take action from a place of inner trust, knowing that the right clients, opportunities, and circumstances will show up at the right time. This balance between doing and letting go is where the magic happens. I've had to remind myself countless times that intuition doesn't require force. It requires trust in both the timing and the unfolding of events. The ultimate shift I experienced was a shift in my mindset. I moved from a mentality of control to one of flow. I stopped seeing life as something I had to control and manipulate and started seeing it as a co-creation with the universe. Life isn't a rigid path, it's a flowing river. You don't have to paddle upstream, you just need to follow the current and let it guide you. This shift wasn't easy. It took time. But once I started seeing life in this way, everything became easier. I didn't have to force or fight anymore. Instead, I allowed myself to flow with life. Opportunities became clearer. I was less stressed. And most importantly, I was at peace with the process. The universe is always working in your favor. You just have to trust that it knows the best timing and course for you. As we've journeyed through these steps, you've seen how trusting your intuition can bring transformation. But there's one last piece of the puzzle. What happens when things don't go as planned? What do you do when your intuition leads you down a path that seems risky or uncertain? The final step is crucial, and I'll be sharing it with you in the next segment. You won't want to miss it, trust me. Stay tuned to discover how to master the art of intuitive decision-making even when the path ahead is unclear. Step 7. The final step, mastering intuitive decision-making even in uncertainty. We've covered a lot on this journey to connecting with our intuition, from seeking clarity, embracing silence, practicing meditation, to listening to that inner voice. It's been a path full of insights, revelations, and transformations. But there's one last crucial piece to the puzzle. Mastering intuitive decision-making, especially when the path ahead feels unclear, risky, or downright terrifying. So let's talk about what happens when you've done all the right things, meditated, listened to your intuition, surrendered to the process, and then you're faced with a decision that feels like it could go either way. The stakes are high. There's uncertainty and maybe even fear creeping in. This is where many people get stuck. They second-guess themselves, overthink, and let doubt cloud their judgment. But here's the truth I learned. You don't need to have everything figured out to make the right decision. The power of intuitive decision-making is realizing that uncertainty isn't something to fear. It's actually where your intuition thrives. I remember the first time I faced a decision that truly challenged my intuition. I had been working on a project for months. Everything was in place, and I was feeling confident. But then an opportunity came up. An opportunity that felt completely out of left field. It was risky. It didn't seem to fit with what I was doing, and the timeline was short. I had no idea if it would work, but something deep within me told me to go for it. My first reaction? Panic. What if I fail? What if this is a mistake? But then I paused. I took a deep breath, listened to that whisper within, and realized that I was standing at a crossroads where both paths were uncertain. I could stay in my comfort zone, or I could trust the pull of my intuition, even if it seemed irrational at the time. So I took the leap. I trusted the process, and against all odds, it paid off. The decision turned out to be one of the best I ever made, even though at the time it didn't make logical sense. The fear of the unknown was real, but the power of trusting that inner knowing was far stronger. This is where things get interesting. You see, intuition often doesn't follow the rules of logic. It doesn't always make sense in the traditional, rational way. But the beauty of intuitive decision-making is that it doesn't require logic to work, and it's not about pros and cons list or having all the facts. It's about tapping into that deeper wisdom that often knows more than our minds can comprehend. I had an experience that tested this in a big way. I was considering a career change, something I had never done before, and I wasn't entirely sure I was qualified for. My friends and family were supportive, but they kept asking, "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you certain it's the right move?" My mind started spinning with doubts. What if I wasn't ready? What if I failed? But when I tuned into my intuition, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and excitement. It wasn't fear that I was feeling, it was the certainty that this decision was aligned with who I truly was and where I wanted to go. Despite what my logical mind said, I made the decision to move forward. Wow. And let me tell you, it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Not only did I thrive in that new career, but I also learned that my intuition wasn't wrong. It was guiding me to the place I needed to be, even though logic and conventional wisdom said otherwise. This is where patience plays a huge role. You don't need to rush into decisions just because there's pressure from the outside world. I've often found that the right decision isn't about rushing, it's about waiting for the right timing. Intuition doesn't need to be forced. It will come when the time is right. But it requires that you trust in the process and, more importantly, in yourself. I remember a time when I was offered an amazing opportunity, but I had a gut feeling it wasn't the right time for me. Everyone around me was telling me to jump at the chance. This could be your big break. But my intuition told me to wait. Not now. There's something better coming. I didn't take the offer. And within a few weeks, something even better came along, an opportunity I couldn't have imagined, but one that was perfectly aligned with my goals. Waiting wasn't easy, but it was the right choice. The lesson? Trust that your intuition will guide you to make the right decisions at the right time. If you don't feel certain, don't rush. It's okay to wait for clarity. Your intuition knows when to act and when to hold back. One of the biggest challenges to intuitive decision-making is the self-doubt that creeps in when things don't immediately work out. There are moments when your intuition leads you down a path, but things don't go according to plan. The temptation to second-guess yourself and think, maybe I made the wrong choice, can be overwhelming. I've been there. I made decisions that seemed perfect at the time, only to face setbacks or challenges along the way. But I've learned to trust that these challenges are part of the process. They're not signs that my intuition was wrong. They're signs that I'm learning and growing. Intuition isn't about a smooth, perfect path. It's about listening, learning, and course-correcting as needed. When I faced setbacks, I didn't give up. I didn't stop listening to my inner voice. I stayed the course, trusting that my intuition would guide me through the challenges. And every single time, it did. Here's a little secret. Intuitive decision-making isn't always linear. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. And sometimes it feels like you're stepping into the unknown with no map, no compass. But that's the magic of intuition. It's the ability to trust the unknown, even when you don't have all the answers. In the end, mastering intuitive decision-making is about trusting yourself. It's about knowing that, even in uncertainty, you are guided by something deeper than your logical mind. And it's about letting go of the fear of making mistakes, knowing that each decision leads you closer to who you are meant to become. As we wrap up this journey, I want to leave you with this final thought. Intuition is the key to a fulfilling life, but it's a key that requires practice, trust, and patience. There's no perfect formula for how to follow it, and no one path that guarantees success. But if you learn to trust yourself, to listen to that quiet whisper within, you'll find that life becomes a little less overwhelming, a little more magical. So how do you start? The first step is simple. Start trusting yourself. Trust the process. Trust the little nudges you feel, and don't be afraid to take the leap when it feels right. What's the biggest intuitive decision you've had to make in your life? Drop a comment below and let me know. Let's keep this conversation going, because trust me, when we start following our intuition, amazing things happen. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. And remember, your intuition is always guiding you. Just listen. So here's the big question. What's your intuition trying to tell you right now? Maybe it's a whisper you've been ignoring, or a gut feeling you've been too scared to act on. Whatever it is, I challenge you to take one step towards listening to it. Start small, sit in silence, meditate, or simply trust one tiny nudge today. And here's the twist. That one step could change everything. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever followed your intuition and been surprised by the outcome? I'd love to hear your stories. And if this video resonated with you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more content like this. Until next time, trust the whisper. It's your greatest guide.